Right, so in this video we're going through how to make a Space Invaders style movement, and that's got some actual tricky things because basically you need to have a thing that controls the enemies. Now it is possible for them to control themselves, but I think it's easier to have an enemy's controller in this instance. So I've created an enemy controller object, added it to my service locator, and it's here. I'll just drag it in, and it looks like this so far. Okay, it's got a list of the enemies, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. It's got the enemy speed they're going to move. It's got the direction, although I think 2 is a bit rapid. I changed it in the editor to be 1.5 actually. The 2 was very fast in my tests before I did this. I've got the direction they're traveling and the drop distance. That's going to be an integer, either 1 or -1, right or left. Okay, don't need anything crazy. So first step is we need to find all the objects and get them into a list. Now, it's not that difficult, and the reason I'm using a list over an array is that I want to remove things from the list. I'm going to remove enemies when they die, so that's why a list is better than an array. So now there is a thing called game object find objects by tag. Find objects with tag. Yeah. And you do enemy, which I have tagged my enemies with. But that will actually come back as an array, and we want a list. So you have to go like this, and then dot to list. And then you have to say game objects. A bit tricky, I know. Like that. I know it's tricky and weird, but you just have to sort of remember. I actually remembered that one, but you can often just look them up. Right, so let's go back to the thing here, and then the list is empty. We'll press play, and it will populate with the 6 enemies. Okay, there we go. Now, we've got an event already in our events controller when, I'll come back to that later, when an enemy dies. I'm just going to delete this. That's for later on. So when an enemy dies, that is going to invoke this event. But the thing is, we need to now know which enemy has died. So I'm going to change this to public, to do event enemy died, delegate, but now it takes a game object called enemy. All right, so now down here, instead of being event delegate enemy dead, it's going to be an enemy dead here, and this invoke will have to take in a game object, we'll call it geo, and then we'll invoke them with geo. So now, I know this is confusing, but let me explain. Before we had events that return no parameter, return nothing and had no parameters. Now we've got a new event that has no return value but has a game object. So when the actual enemy triggers the event and says, "Oh, I am dying," it can say which one is dying out loud. And so people can be like, "Oh, an enemy died, and it's that one," because we need to know it. This is very useful in various ways. Okay, so this is just the event enemy died. So now we need to go to the enemy and change the event of when it dies. So if the enemy's health is less than equal to 0, we run enemy dead. Okay. Now we run enemy died, which is, this is the actual event, but now it needs a game object. So you can run this, not this, sorry, you run game object. Okay. And so now the actual object that this script is on will be sent to the event. Okay. So if we are in the enemy's controller here, what we can do is when an enemy dies, we can remove it from the list. Otherwise, we're going to have a list with too many enemies in, and it's going to be stupid, right? So we're going to have to go to on enable. So done. So we just go like that, and now I know which object has died. So now I can do enemies dot remove go, and now when an enemy dies, now I should obviously on the disable. Take it away. Right, now, when an enemy dies... Right, so... There you go. It's been removed from the side, you can see. So now this event not only is being triggered when enemy dies, but we know exactly which enemy has died. That's really handy, okay? So, yes, that's really, really, really good. So now we can, so that'll get the list of enemies. So now that's let's get it so the enemy's controller moves the people around, right? So we need to do that on update. Okay, and the reason I did the removing them before this, I did the movement, is because if you kill one, it will crash, because when it tries to move it, it won't be able to move it because it's not there. For each game object, that actually had completed it for me, but there we go. Thank you. And then we're going to move it. So we'll do enemy.transform.position plus equals vector3.right times direction times enemy speed times time.delta time. Okay, so they'll go right now. They'll all head off right because direction's 1 and doesn't do anything. So every update, game controller will bugger off to the right. The enemy's controller will send them to the right. Right, okay, so now we need another type of event that an enemy has hit a wall. So I won't bore you with how I've done it, 'cause I've done it before, but I've added a left and a right wall with rigid bodies and box colliders to trigger and kinematic, and I've tagged them left and right wall. Okay, so we need to do an event if they've hit a wall. Now I don't want to do 2 events. They've hit a right wall, they've hit a left wall. So I want to do an event that again will take a tag. It will say like right wall or left wall. So I'm going to make a new delegate type, because this time it's going to be called hit wall delegate. It's not going to return any values, but it is going to take a string that's a tag. It's going to be the tag of the wall we hit. Okay, so now I go down here and I make a version of it. So I should always copy and paste this. Go right, do that, and then we'll go enemy hit wall, enemy hitting wall, and then I'll put enemy hit wall as my thing here. Now that takes a string, which is tag. Okay, then we invoke it with tag. So just remember the steps to making a new event. If you need a new structure for your method, you've got to make it here. At this point, I've probably got most of the structures I'll ever need. If it's just a normal event with you don't want any parameters, but we want to know which wall we hit. So when we shout out hit a wall, we're going to say hit a wall, right wall, hit a wall, left wall. When in the others, like game paused, there wasn't anything to shout out, just game paused, right? But is there extra information? Yes, I could have made 2 events, right wall hit, left wall hit, but I just thought I'd show you how to do an event that that you can send information with. So I thought I also just did that with this one, but we're doing it again. It's good practice. So I make a new delegate structure, which has no return value in a string. Okay, and then I make the actual event here from that structure, and then this is just executing it, right? So you just got to remember those steps. If you haven't got the structure you want, you make it. If you just want to say like something's happened and you don't have any parameters, you can just use event delegate, which is like a sort of generic one. So I've made that. So now we need to do it when we hit a wall, that the enemy hits a wall, it runs that, right? So we go to an enemy. Okay, if collision equals bullet. Okay, so if collision equals right wall, then we do event controller, or that's called event controller dot hit wall, enemy hit wall, and then we do right wall, and then we do left wall for left. Can't do else because it could hit other things in the future that aren't left or right wall, like a bullet another enemy is hitting, shooting out. So that's going to execute that event. So that's going to shout out, we've hit the right wall, we hit the left wall. So the enemies themselves don't actually care about that. It's the enemy controller that cares about that. So then we need to do hit wall. So the event was called enemy hitting wall. So we go to the enemy's controller and we're going to add ourselves to that, and we're going to say enemy hit wall, right? Then we're going to take it away from the disable. You might have to watch these steps every time you want to do something. Make a private void enemy hit wall. And then this takes a string called tag. All right. Now we go if tag is equal to right wall, we're going to set the direction to be -1. If tag is left wall, we're going to set it to be 1. Now, this is better than having a wall that bounces you, because the thing is, you could hit, more enemies could hit the wall, or you could hit the wall twice really quick. You could put some sort of delay in that says, like, after you hit a wall, wait a second. But it is a lot easier to sort of have 2 collisions. One's right, one's left. You know. Right, so there you go. That'll work. And now, because direction is changing to 1 and -1, and we use it here, they'll bounce back and forth off the walls. Maybe I should have made it faster. Right, now we need to get it to drop. So not difficult. Right, when we hit a wall, we go for each. Aim object in enemies. Enemy dot position dot transform dot position plus equals vector 3 dot down times drop distance. Don't just do vector time dot delta time, because this is a one-off instant drop down that much for every object that's in that list. Play it and it should drop. Drop distance is 1, I think, by the way. There you go. Boom, boom, boom. And then if we wanted to, we could do a thing like as the enemy count gets lower. Got to those sounds. As the enemy count gets lower, the you know, whatever, the rest happens. So there you go. That's the movement in that. And obviously I could do a collision with the player, or do it, or when the thing hits the floor here, then it's a game over event. You can see that I know it's annoying to add all these events, but they really are the best way of doing it, because that's what that's how you do those systems.